The sun was just beginning to set, casting an orange glow over the quiet neighborhood. A single mother of two was unloading groceries from her car, her kids playing on the porch. She had just finished a long shift at work and was looking forward to a peaceful evening at home. But peace was the last thing she was about to get. A police cruiser rolled slowly down the street, its headlights cutting through the dimming light. The officers inside had been patrolling the area, looking for any signs of trouble. When they saw the woman, they paused. Something about her, maybe the way she looked, maybe the neighborhood she lived in, made them decide to stop. One of the officers stepped out, adjusting his belt as he approached. "Ma'am, can I see some ID?" he asked, his tone firm but not outright hostile. The woman frowned, confused. She hadn't done anything wrong. "Is there a problem, officer?" she asked, keeping her voice calm. The cop glanced at her car, then back at her. "We got reports of a suspicious vehicle matching this description. Just need to verify you're the owner." That didn't make sense. Her car was an old sedan, nothing flashy, nothing that would stand out. But she didn't argue. She reached for her purse to grab her license, her hands steady despite the unease settling in her chest. Her youngest child, a little boy no older than 5, peeked out from behind her legs. "Mommy, what's wrong?" he whispered. She forced a smile. "Nothing, baby. Just gotta show the officer something real quick." The second cop had gotten out now, standing a few feet away, watching. The air felt heavy, like something was about to go wrong. The first officer took her ID, studying it longer than necessary. Then, without warning, his demeanor shifted. "This your current address?" he asked, suspicion creeping into his voice. "Yes," she said, her patience thinning. "I've lived here for 3 years." The cops exchanged a look. Then the second one stepped forward. "Mind if we take a look inside your car?" Her stomach dropped. They had no reason to search her car. No warrant, no probable cause. Just a feeling, one she knew too well. "I don't consent to any searches," she said firmly. The first cop's jaw tightened. "Ma'am, if you've got nothing to hide, this'll be quick." She stood her ground. "I know my rights. You can't just search my car because you feel like it." The tension spiked. The officers didn't like being challenged. The second cop moved closer, his hand resting near his belt. "Step away from the vehicle, ma'am." Her heart pounded. This wasn't right. She wasn't a criminal. She was just a mom trying to get her kids inside with the groceries. That's when her phone buzzed in her pocket. She ignored it, but the cops noticed. "Hands where I can see them," the first cop snapped. She froze. This was escalating too fast. Her kids were watching, their eyes wide with fear. And then, headlights. A truck pulled up behind the police cruiser, tires crunching on the gravel. The door swung open, and a tall, broad-shouldered man stepped out. The woman's breath caught. Her brother had arrived. And the look on his face said everything. This wasn't over. Not even close. The moment her brother stepped out of his truck, the energy in the air shifted. The officers stiffened, their hands instinctively moving closer to their belts. They weren't used to being interrupted, especially not by someone who looked like him, tall, solid, with a quiet intensity that made it clear he wasn't there to play games. The woman let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Her brother had always been the calm one, the one who thought before he acted. But she also knew that when it came to family, he didn't back down. "Everything all right here?" he asked, his voice steady but firm. He kept his distance, not making any sudden moves, but his presence alone was enough to make the cops reassess the situation. The first officer, the one who had been questioning her, squared his shoulders. "This is a police matter, sir. Step back." Her brother didn't flinch. "I just asked if everything was all right." My sister called me, said she was being hassled while trying to unload groceries. The woman hadn't actually called him, her phone had buzzed earlier, probably a text, but she didn't correct him. The cops didn't need to know that. The second officer, the one who had been silent until now, spoke up. We had reports of a suspicious vehicle. We're just doing our job. Her brother's eyes flicked to her car, an old, unremarkable sedan with a dent on the bumper and a child sticker on the back window. Then he looked back at the cops. This the suspicious vehicle? Looks like a mom's car to me. There was a beat of silence. The first officer's jaw tightened. Sir, we don't need your input here. Either step back or you'll be interfering with an investigation. The woman's stomach twisted. She knew how these things could go. One wrong word, one wrong move, and things could spiral. She touched her brother's arm lightly, a silent plea to keep it cool. He gave her a barely there nod, then turned back to the officers. Look, I get it. You're doing your job. But she's got her ID, the car's hers, and there's no reason to hold her up. Kids are getting scared. He motioned to her little ones, who were still huddled near the porch, watching with wide eyes. The youngest was clutching his sister's hand, his lower lip trembling. For a second, it seemed like the officers might back off. Then the first cop's radio crackled to life, a dispatcher's voice, muffled but clear enough. Unit 12, we've got a 10 to 50, possible stolen vehicle, dark sedan, last seen near Elm and 5th. The cop's eyes locked onto the woman's car again. You said this was your vehicle? Yes, she said, frustration creeping into her voice. I've had it for years. Registration up to date? Yes. Mind if we take a look? Her brother cut in before she could answer. You got a warrant? The cop's expression darkened. We don't need one if we have probable cause. And what's the probable cause? Her brother pressed. Her being black in her own driveway. The second officer stepped forward, his tone warning. That's enough. Either cooperate or we'll have to detain you both. The woman's pulse spiked. This was going south fast. She could see her brother's muscles tense, but instead of snapping back, he did something unexpected. He pulled out his phone. You mind if I record this? He asked, already tapping the screen. Just so we're all on the same page. The officers exchanged a glance. Body cameras were one thing, but civilians recording them? That changed the game. The first cop held up a hand. Sir, put the phone away. Why? Her brother asked, calm but unyielding. If you're doing everything by the book, you got nothing to worry about. A tense silence followed. The woman could see the gears turning in the cops' heads, weighing their options, calculating the risk. Then, finally, the second officer sighed. Run the plates, he muttered to his partner. The first cop hesitated, then walked back to the cruiser, his posture stiff with irritation. The woman watched as he leaned in, speaking into the radio. Her brother kept the camera rolling, his expression unreadable. A minute passed. Then another. The cop returned, his face unreadable. Plates check out. The woman almost sagged with relief, but she held it together. Can we go now? The officers didn't answer right away. The first one looked like he wanted to say something else, something sharp, but the second cop shook his head slightly. Yeah, the second cop said finally. You're free to go. Her brother didn't lower the phone. Appreciate it, officers. The cops didn't reply. They just turned and walked back to their cruiser, the engine roaring to life as they pulled away, tires kicking up gravel. The woman exhaled shakily, her hands trembling now that the adrenaline was fading. Her brother finally put his phone away and turned to her. You okay? He asked, his voice softer now. She nodded, swallowing hard. Yeah. Thanks for showing up. He glanced toward the street where the cops had disappeared, then back at her. "This ain't over," he said quietly. "They'll be back." She knew he was right. Cops like that didn't just let things go. But for tonight, at least, they were safe. She picked up the grocery bags, her kids rushing to help, their little hands grabbing whatever they could carry. Inside the house, the door locked behind them. But outside, the night felt heavier than before. The house was quiet now, the kids finally asleep after the chaos of the evening. The woman sat at the kitchen table, a cup of tea going cold in front of her. Her brother leaned against the counter, arms crossed, staring out the window into the dark. The streetlights cast long shadows, but the police cruiser was long gone. "You should report them," her brother said, breaking the silence. She let out a tired laugh. "And say what?" "That they did their job but made me uncomfortable." He turned to look at her, his expression serious. "They had no reason to stop you. No reason to ask for your ID. No reason to threaten to search your car. That's not policing, that's harassment." She knew he was right. But she also knew how these things went. Complaints disappeared into paperwork. Cops stuck together. And then? Then she'd have a target on her back every time she left the house. Her phone buzzed on the table. A message from her neighbor: "Saw what happened. You okay?" Word traveled fast in this neighborhood. Too fast. She typed back a quick "yeah, all good," but it didn't feel true. Her brother's phone rang. He glanced at the screen, then silenced it. "I gotta head out soon," he said. "But I don't like leaving you here alone after this." "I'll be fine," she said automatically. He gave her a look. "You know they'll be back, right? Cops like that don't just walk away." A chill ran down her spine. She did know. But admitting it out loud made it too real. Before she could answer, headlights flashed through the window. Both of them froze. A car was slowing down outside. Her brother moved first, stepping toward the front door. "Stay here." She didn't listen. She followed him, peering through the peephole. Not a police cruiser. A black SUV, idling at the curb. The driver's side window rolled down, and a man leaned out, scanning the houses. Then his eyes landed on hers, or at least it felt like they did, even through the door. Her brother's hand went to the deadbolt. "You know him?" She shook her head. Never seen him before. The SUV sat there for another minute, engine rumbling. Then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, it drove off. Her brother let out a slow breath. That was weird. "Maybe just someone lost," she said, but neither of them believed it. They went back to the kitchen, the air heavier than before. "You should come stay with me for a few days," her brother said. She thought about it. Packing up the kids, leaving the house empty. But running felt like letting them win. "I can't," she said. "This is my home." He didn't argue. Just nodded. "Then I'm staying tonight." She didn't protest. The next morning, the sun came up like nothing had happened. The kids ate cereal at the table, oblivious to the tension. Her brother made coffee, strong and black, the way he always did. The woman checked her phone, no missed calls, no messages. Maybe it really was over. Then the doorbell rang. All three of them froze. Her brother set his coffee down. "I got it." She followed him anyway. Through the peephole, a uniform. But not the same officers from last night. This one was older, his posture stiff, his face unreadable. Her brother opened the door just enough to talk. "Can I help you?" The cop's eyes flicked past him, landing on her. "Ma'am, we'd like to ask you a few questions about last night." Her stomach dropped. "What kind of questions?" The cop hesitated. "Then, there's been a complaint." Her brother barked out a laugh. She's the one filing a complaint. The cop's expression didn't change. Not from her. From the officers involved. They're alleging obstruction and verbal aggression. The woman's hands curled into fists. They were turning it around on her. Her brother stepped forward, his voice low and dangerous. "You've got to be kidding me." The cop held up a hand. "I'm just here to get your side of the story. If everything checks out, this goes nowhere." She knew what that meant. If you play along, we'll drop it. But playing along had never gotten her anywhere. She met the cop's eyes. "I'll give my statement. But not here. Not without a lawyer." The cop's jaw tightened. "Suit yourself." He handed her a card. "Call this number by end of day. Or next time, it won't be a courtesy visit." Then he turned and walked away. Her brother slammed the door. "They're trying to intimidate you." She knew. And the worst part? It was working. Her phone buzzed again. "Another neighbor, cops were just at Ms. Johnson's place asking about you." This wasn't ending. It was just beginning. The cop's business card sat on the kitchen counter like a ticking bomb. The woman stared at it while her brother paced behind her, his boots thudding against the linoleum floor. The kids had been shuffled into the living room with cartoons blaring, too loud, but she needed them distracted. "You're not calling that number," her brother said, voice tight. "That's exactly what they want." She picked up the card, flipping it between her fingers. "If I don't, they'll come back. And next time, it won't be just questions." A knock at the back door made them both freeze. Not the front. The back. Her brother moved first, grabbing a baseball bat leaning by the fridge. He motioned for her to stay put as he crept toward the door. Another knock, softer this time. Through the curtained window, a familiar face peeked in. Ms. Johnson, the elderly neighbor from across the street. The woman let out a shaky breath and hurried to unlock the door. Ms. Johnson slipped inside, her wrinkled face pinched with worry. "Child, you all right? Those police been asking about you all morning." The woman's stomach twisted. "What did they say?" "Asked if I saw anything last night, if you caused trouble in the neighborhood." Ms. Johnson scoffed. "Told them the only trouble we got is cops harassing hard-working moms." Her brother smirked, but the woman just felt tired. Ms. Johnson patted her arm. "You need anything, you holler. Ain't right what they doin', dot." After she left, the woman sagged into a chair. The walls felt like they were closing in. Her brother's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then cursed under his breath. "My job says I gotta come in. Emergency shift." They both knew what that meant. She forced a smile. "Go. We'll be fine." He hesitated, then grabbed a pen and scribbled on a napkin. "This is my buddy's number. Ex-Marine, works security downtown. You feel anything off, you call him. He'll be here in 10 minutes. She tucked the napkin into her pocket, the numbers burning against her thigh. The day crawled by. She kept the kids close, jumping at every car that passed. By afternoon, she dared to check the local community group online. Her breath caught. A post from an anonymous account: "Anyone know the black woman in the blue house on Oak? Cops say she's involved in stolen car rings." Comments piled beneath it. "That's Ms. Carter. She's a nurse. A cab, but this seems sketch. Saw her brother there last night, dude looks like a felon." Her hands shook. They were painting a target on her back. The doorbell rang again. This time, it was a woman in a pantsuit holding a clipboard. "County Child Protective Services," she said sweetly. "We received a concern about the children in this household." The world tilted. They were coming for her kids. The words Child Protective Services hung in the air like a guillotine blade. The woman's knees nearly buckled, but she forced herself to stand straighter, gripping the doorframe until her knuckles turned white. Behind her, she could hear her children giggling at some cartoon nonsense, completely unaware their world was being threatened. "Let me see your identification," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. The woman in the pantsuit blinked, caught off guard by the demand, but recovered quickly. She flashed a laminated badge too fast to read properly. "Standard procedure after a neighbor reported concerning behavior last night." "May I come in?" Every cell in her body screamed no. But refusing would make her look guilty. She stepped aside just enough to let the social worker enter but positioned herself to block direct access to the kids. The woman's eyes immediately began scanning the room, lingering on the unfolded laundry pile, the cereal bowls still on the table, the toys scattered across the floor. Normal life stuff. But in the hands of the wrong person? Evidence of neglect. "Your children's names and ages?" The clipboard pen hovered ready. "None of your business unless you have a court order." The words flew out before she could stop them. The social worker's smile tightened. "Ma'am, cooperation makes this process much smoother." Her pulse roared in her ears. She'd seen this play out before, a cousin who lost custody for 60 days over a messy house inspection, a coworker who still hadn't gotten her kids back after a false drug allegation. The system didn't play fair with women who looked like her. A crash came from the kitchen. Both women turned to see her 4-year-old standing over a shattered juice glass, his eyes wide. "I was thirsty, Mommy." The social worker moved faster than she did. "Oh sweetheart, let me help you before you." "Don't touch him." The words exploded like gunfire. Her baby flinched. The social worker froze. The air turned to ice. The clipboard woman recovered first, crouching to address the boy. "Your mommy seems very stressed. Does she yell like this often?" A masterclass in twisting words into weapons. The woman saw red. She snatched her phone from the counter and hit the speed dial for her brother's friend. 3 rings. A pickup. "Talk to me. I need you here. Now." She didn't recognize her own voice. The social worker stood, all faux concern gone. "I'll be filing my report this afternoon. Expect a follow-up visit within 48 hours. She strode toward the door, then paused. "You know, most parents want to prove they have nothing to hide." The slam of the door shook the pictures on the walls. Her son burst into tears. She scooped him up, rocking back and forth, whispering promises into his hair that she wasn't sure she could keep. The ex-Marine arrived in 7 minutes flat. Bald, built like a brick wall, and covered in tattoos that said "Don't fuck with me" in every language. He took one look at her face and pulled out his own phone. "Hey, it's me. We need the lawyer. Right now." While he made calls, she cleaned up the glass with trembling hands. Every shard felt like another piece of her life breaking. Her phone buzzed with a new email notification. The subject line made her blood freeze. "Notice of child endangerment investigation." Attached was a scanned complaint citing erratic behavior, unsafe home environment, and, her stomach dropped, possible drug paraphernalia observed during welfare check. Complete fiction. But fiction became truth once it was in writing. The Marine read over her shoulder and cursed. "They're building a paper trail. Classic playbook." He pointed at the drug allegation. "They'll come back with a warrant to search for narcotics next." She thought of the ibuprofen in her bathroom, the half bottle of wine in the fridge. How easy it would be for something to get planted. The front door burst open. Her brother stormed in, still in his work coveralls, reeking of motor oil and rage. "They pulled me over on the way here. Broken tail light. Bullshit. They were stalling me." The Marine nodded grimly. "They're isolating her. Standard tactic." Her brother's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and went pale. "It's my job." He answered on speaker. "Effective immediately, your employment is suspended pending investigation into last night's altercation with law enforcement." The HR rep sounded bored. "Security will escort you to collect your tools." The call disconnected. 3 attacks in under an hour. Home. Kids. Livelihood. They weren't playing games anymore. The Marine cracked his knuckles. Time to stop reacting and start fighting back. The room felt suddenly smaller with the weight of what was happening pressing in from all sides. The woman clutched her son tighter, his small arms wrapped around her neck as he sniffled against her shoulder. Her brother stood frozen, the phone still gripped in his hand like he couldn't believe what he'd just heard. The Marine, now introduced as Ray, was already moving, pulling out a notepad and scribbling down names and numbers. "We need to document everything," Ray said, his voice low and steady. "Every interaction, every accusation, every time they come at you. Dates, times, names. If they're playing dirty, we need to be 10 steps ahead." Her brother finally snapped out of his daze, slamming his fist on the counter. "This is bullshit. They can't just." "They can," Ray cut in. "And they will. Unless we shut it down first." The woman set her son down, kneeling to meet his teary eyes. "Go play with your sister in the living room, baby. Mommy's got some grown-up stuff to handle, okay?" He nodded, wiping his nose with the back of his hand before scampering off. She turned back to the men, her voice barely above a whisper. "What do we do?" Ray slid the notepad toward her. "First, you call this lawyer. She's good, specializes in wrongful targeting cases. She'll get ahead of the CPS complaint and your brother's job suspension." Her brother scoffed. "And what about the cops who started all this? They just get to walk away?" Ray's expression darkened. "No. But we play this smart. Right now, they're trying to rattle you into doing something stupid, something they can use against you. We don't give them that chance." The woman picked up the notepad, staring at the lawyer's number. It felt like a lifeline. But then her phone buzzed again, another email. This time from the apartment complex management. "Notice of lease violation. Complaints have been filed regarding disturbances and unauthorized occupants at your residence." She read it aloud, her voice hollow. Her brother snatched the phone, scanning the message before letting out a string of curses. "They're trying to make you homeless now?" Ray didn't look surprised. "They're cutting off all your support systems. Job, kids, home. Classic pressure tactics." The woman sank into a chair, her mind racing. She thought about her kids, their school, their little lives built here. She thought about the nights she'd spent working double shifts just to keep this roof over their heads. And now? Now it could all be gone because some cops decided to make her their project. A knock at the door, firm, official. All 3 of them tensed. Ray held up a hand, moving to the window to peek through the blinds. 2 uniforms. Different guys from last night. Her brother grabbed her arm. "Don't answer it." But she was already standing, smoothing her shirt with trembling hands. "If I don't, they'll just come back with more." Ray nodded. "I'll record everything. You don't say a word without the lawyer present." She took a deep breath and opened the door. The officers stood there, their expressions unreadable. The taller one spoke first. "Ma'am, we need to ask you a few questions about an ongoing investigation." She crossed her arms. "Am I being detained?" The officers exchanged glances. The second one, younger, with a nervous tick in his jaw, cleared his throat. "No, ma'am. But cooperation would be in your best interest." She almost laughed. "My best interest? You mean like how your buddies showed up at my job?" Like how CPS just left here threatening to take my kids. The taller cop's posture stiffened. We're not here to argue, ma'am. We're following up on reports of. Save it, her brother cut in, stepping forward. You got nothing real, so you're fishing. And we're done playing. The younger cop's hand twitched toward his belt, a subtle movement, but Ray caught it, stepping into view with his phone raised, recording. You might want to rethink that, officer. The tension crackled like a live wire. The taller cop held up a placating hand. No need for hostility. We'll be in touch. They left, but the victory felt hollow. Back inside, Ray immediately got on the phone with the lawyer. The woman collapsed onto the couch, her children curling into her sides like they sensed the storm brewing. Her brother paced like a caged animal. This isn't over. They're just getting started. She knew he was right. But for the first time since this nightmare began, she felt something other than fear. Anger. White-hot and razor-sharp. They wanted a fight? Fine. She'd give them one. The anger burning in her chest was different now, not the panicked, desperate kind from before, but something colder. Sharper. More dangerous. She watched through the window as the patrol car rolled away, its tires crunching over gravel like bones breaking. Ray hung up the phone, his face grim. Lawyer's on her way. She says don't talk to anyone until she gets here. Her brother kicked the couch leg, sending a stack of coloring books tumbling. So we just sit here? Let them keep coming at us? No. The woman surprised herself by how steady her voice came out. We fight back. The right way. She pulled out her phone and opened the video her brother had recorded the night before, the cops harassing her over groceries, demanding ID without cause, threatening to search her car. The footage was shaky but clear. Then she pulled up the CPS worker's visit from this morning, the veiled threats about taking her kids. The lease violation email. The job suspension notice. Ray whistled low. You've got receipts. She nodded, already typing. And I know exactly where to send them. The local news station's tip line responded within 20 minutes. The reporter, a no-nonsense black woman with a reputation for holding power accountable, arrived with a camera crew before sundown. The woman told her story, every detail, every fear, every dirty trick they'd pulled. She showed the evidence. And when the reporter asked why she thought this was happening, she didn't flinch. Because I stood up for myself. And some people can't handle that from a woman who looks like me. The segment aired at 10 p.m. By midnight, it had gone viral. Her phone started blowing up at 3:17 a.m. The first call was from the police chief's office, a terse voicemail requesting a meeting to address her concerns. The second was from the mayor's aide, stammering about regrettable misunderstandings. The third was from the apartment complex manager, suddenly reversing the lease violation with a shaky-voiced apology. She silenced her phone and went back to sleep for the first time in days. Morning brought a crowd to her front yard. News vans. Neighbors with casseroles. A civil rights attorney handing her a business card with a meaningful nod. And standing at the edge of it all, the two original officers from that first night, their faces like storm clouds as they watched the circus unfold. The taller one met her eyes across the lawn. She held his gaze, unblinking, until he looked away first. Her brother came up beside her, holding 2 cups of coffee. They're scared now. She took the coffee, letting the steam warm her face. Good.